Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron. I hope you're having an incredible day or night in Jesus. Thank you so much for being here. Check out our other videos. Join us daily. Share with your friends and family and your church family. We're looking today on how to name a church. Now, this is extraordinarily important on how to name a church. I've got some friends that have just started naming their church the church. It's like, okay. I remember for many years it got very popular to say the Pentecostals of wherever it was. Seems to work out well for many. We know of a church that runs many thousands and very prominent people and singers and music groups that if I were to mention most of you, if not all of you, would have heard from, come out from this church. But Sister Waldron and I can remember when the church started out, it was known as Koinonia Baptist Church. Well, where we were at, people thought it was a cult church. People thought it was a Korean church. And most people didn't know what it was. And so they eventually did away with Koinonia, which is fellowship, which is a wonderful Greek word, and just put and designated it in the area that it was, where there was an LPGA golf tournament. It's a very wealthy area, that kind of thing. And it immediately went into the thousands, had the same leadership from the pastor to all the staff, because it was like a daughter work from another church. Everything else was the same. They told me this personally. They said we went from running 21 to over 6,000 almost overnight just because of the name change. So naming a church is extraordinarily important. Now, of course, it's not nearly as important as the doctrine that's taught on the inside. All a good name can do is it kind of gets your foot in the door. You want to make sure that it's something easily pronounceable, as we've already seen with the example of Koinonia, and biblical. Now, that brings us back. I mean, is there a certain name that all churches are supposed to be named? I mean, you'll read in the epistles about the churches of Christ, the churches of God, these type things. To the angel of the church at Ephesus, to the angel of the church at, Thyatira, Pergamum, Smyrna, etc., Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. And so the answer to that seems to be not really. It doesn't seem like there's something, other than the fact that it's the church. I know of one group that wants their churches named the ecclesias, the called out ones, the group. Others, like Jehovah's Witnesses, we'd call it a kingdom hall. I don't really find that in Scripture either. And so naming of the church, really the preeminent thing to do is to pray about it. Ask God to help you, because it could be there's certain people, unbeknownst to us, that in our community, that when we name the church correctly, that it will immediately connect with them and it will give us inroads into that community. Again, nothing is going to overcome a bad experience when they get to church. Inhospitableness, unfriendliness, unkemptness of the grounds, disorganization, those type things. We all know that. But again, a church properly named, and that's the reason I think you should pray about it. I really appreciated Brother Chester Wright. Many years ago, he would come to JCM. He taught in 1986. So that would have been 38 years ago. I think it was 1986. I think he taught 3 hours at a chapel. And he taught, if you're going to have revival, throw your clock out. I remember that. I've got other friends of mine that do everything by a clock, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, and they have great revival, so I'm not sure that you could just say throw the clock out. But he made the point, pray about your name. And so I think that is vitally important, to pray about your name. Now, I will say, some of the church names that are now being bandied around, I'd be really concerned about, like something, the Bible is very much against the groves, this would have been pagan things that they built. Now, unless like I used to pastor near Locust Grove, Georgia, and everybody called it the Grove. Well, people would understand that. But I mean, if you're just saying the Groves, it's like, that may be kind of unbiblical. I mean, I don't think you'd want the Jezebel church or the Ahab church or something like that. I had a friend of mine that he pastored, or no, he was the youth pastor. He's a really good guy. And the name of the church was something to the effect, Ahava Baptist, Ahava. And he said that they struggled because people didn't know what Ahava was. Beulah, years ago when America was far more of a Christian country, and almost universally, people knew what Beulah was, especially in certain parts of the country, but not so much now. Saying community church, I know of people that have done community churches from various theological perspectives. The thing is different things are expected by different people when you say community church. We had a massive community church up the street from us when we lived in Jonesboro, Georgia. And it was just that. It was supposed to be the most milquetoast, watered down, doctrinal thing that would just kind of bring anybody from whatever banner, as long as they called themselves Christian, together. And that was I've worked in Christian book selling, dealt with them quite a bit. I mean, that was just their thing. But I've known of apostolics name their church community church too. And you could get away with it, depending again on the locale and where you're at. And that's going to play just such a huge role in communicating things and communicating things to your community. Now, one thing, I started my first church when I was 28. And one thing I realized quite quickly is you really want to be transparent with people of what kind of church you are. Because so often when you have kind of a generic church name and they don't know what to expect, they'll come in and say, I didn't know y'all are Pentecostal. I didn't know y'all were this. I didn't know. And they kind of get put out by that because they're like, if I'd have known that, I wouldn't have come. Or if I'd have known that, I would have dressed differently. On and so forth. And you can't prepare for every contingency. So really, the best thing is to pray about it, keep it biblical, keep it, obviously in the Christian genre. Don't do the Chrislam church or something like that, or the Chaitin church or something. But keep it biblical, and God may have it for your various groups. Now, I know in the United Pentecostal Church International, I don't know if it's still in the manual. It used to be every church had to have United Pentecostal Church somewhere on the sign. It didn't give any qualifications. Maybe it did at some point, but it didn't when I was doing it. And so I wanted to follow the manual 100%. Well, I was in a place that really, the United Pentecostal Church had a horrific name. People said, well, did you give it that? No, it was on the radio constantly on national ministries saying the United Pentecostal Church, bad people, on and so forth. So I said, so I got a sticky note and put UPCI and put it on top of the church sign, where if you were flying a drone over it, which shows it didn't exist really at that time, or helicopter, you could have seen it. But, I fulfilled it. But I understand why, because people wanted to know. The UPCI is a brand. There's people that want to go to a UPCI church, an AAGLC church, a PAW church, WPF church, a whatever other kind of church, that type thing. So, naming, some people call it branding now. It can be too in your face. I've known of people that name their church a little too, I hate to use this phraseology, milquetoast or weak, that, they had so many people, as Brother Pugh used to talk about all the time, that weren't apostolic coming, and they got the wrong ideas, that they kind of actually took over the church. I've seen that happen. And so they actually changed the church doctrinally, because there's far more of them than of the core group and the core belief system. So we don't want to be deceptive. Cursed be he that doeth the work of the Lord deceptively. So God bless you. Pray about your church name, and let's reach the world for Jesus. Let's have great church when they get there. Bye-bye.